The night Karen screamed at an ambulance to move off HOA property, I knew something in our little community had snapped. That sound, her shrill, commanding voice echoing across Oak Ridge Lane, cut through the sirens like nails on glass. And the thing is, she didn't even know who was inside that ambulance. I remember standing on my porch, the autumn wind biting at my face. My wife Claire was beside me, holding her coffee tight, her eyes fixed on the flashing red lights. "God help her," she whispered. See, I'd lived in Oak Ridge Estates for 12 years. Quiet, tree-lined neighborhood in Northern Virginia. The kind of place where people waved in the mornings, lawns gleamed like golf courses. But lately, it hadn't felt like home. Not since Karen Monroe became HOA president. Karen was the type who believed her clipboard held divine authority. She'd find a veteran for flying a flag 2 inches too low. She wrote up my neighbor for having a non-regulation bird feeder. And when she ran for president, she promised to restore class and compliance to our neighborhood, whatever that meant. I kept my head down, paid my dues, and tried to avoid her drama. But that night, a loud crash echoed through the cul-de-sac. Tires screeched. Then silence. Moments later, an ambulance came roaring down the road. Its lights lit up the maple trees like a storm of red lightning. They pulled up right in front of Lot 17, a rental home that had been sitting empty for months until that day. Earlier, I'd seen a young man move in, maybe mid-20s, dark hair, dressed in jeans and a faded marine jacket. He'd smiled at me when I waved. Didn't seem like trouble. But now, the EMTs were running inside. And then came Karen. She stormed out of her house in her robe, phone in hand, marching toward the ambulance like it was an intruder. "This vehicle is obstructing community access," she yelled. "Can't park here without HOA authorization." The EMT turned, startled. "Ma'am, this is a medical emergency." Karen folded her arms. "You need to move to the visitor lot." I felt my blood boil. "Karen," I called out, "there's someone hurt in there. For God's sake, back off." But she ignored me. She kept arguing, pointing, gesturing like she was more concerned about her precious HOA rules than someone's life. The EMTs hesitated, torn between duty and this lunatic shouting orders, and then a man stumbled out of the rental, pale, clutching his chest. He could barely stand. The medics rushed to catch him before he hit the ground. I ran over, shouting, "Somebody call his family?" But just as I reached him, one of the EMTs said something that froze me. "He's the governor's son." I swear, time stopped. Even Karen blinked, her face draining of color. "The governor's son?" she stammered. "That's impossible." It wasn't. His name was Ethan Caldwell. And I later learned he was a decorated veteran and the only son of Governor Thomas Caldwell. He'd just returned from deployment and had rented the home under an alias to recover quietly. But Karen didn't know that. She just saw a non-compliant tenant. And when the ambulance tried to leave, she blocked the exit with her golf cart. "I said they can't drive through until they check in," she barked. People started coming out of their houses. Lights flicked on. Phones came out, recording. Moved the anger rising in the crowd. "Karen, move the damn cart." Someone shouted. "You're gonna get someone killed," another yelled. But Karen doubled down. Rules are rules. I ran forward and grabbed her by the shoulders. Not hard, just enough to make her look at me. "Listen to me," I said, my voice shaking. "If that man dies because you wanted to prove a point, this neighborhood will never forgive you." Her eyes darted, flickering between fear and pride. For a second I thought she'd cave, but she didn't. She said, "If people can't respect HOA authority, maybe they don't belong here." The EMT shouted, "We're losing him." That's when I snapped. I turned, jumped into my truck, and slammed it into reverse, pushing her golf cart off the road with a single screeching shove. The ambulance flew past, lights blazing. Siren wailing down the hill. Karen stood in the street, trembling, her robe torn, her clipboard cracked in half. I stared at her, disgusted. "You just nearly killed the governor's son," I said quietly. "And everyone here saw it." She looked around, realizing the cameras were still rolling. The neighbors, the lights, the witnesses, but she didn't say a word. The ambulance disappeared into the night. and the neighborhood fell into a strange, heavy silence. Karen turned toward me, her face pale as chalk. This isn't what it looks like, she muttered. Double quotes. Oh, it's exactly what it looks like, I said. You put your rules above a man's life. That night, word spread fast. By midnight, every phone in Oak Ridge was buzzing. Someone had uploaded the video, and within hours, it had gone viral across the state. Karen's face, illuminated by ambulance lights, shouting "Move off HOA property," was everywhere. By morning, reporters were parked at the neighborhood entrance. But what nobody knew yet, not even me, was how deep this mess would go. Because the next day, the governor himself showed up. He didn't come with cameras, no entourage, just a single SUV, tinted windows, and a man in a suit who looked like he carried the weight of the world. Governor Caldwell walked up our street, his eyes scanning the row of perfect lawns, perfect mailboxes, and perfect lies. He stopped at Karen's house. She came out trembling, trying to smile, hands wringing her robe belt. "Governor, He cut her off. "Save it." His voice was low, calm, but sharp enough to slice glass. Then he turned toward me. "You're the one who cleared the way for the ambulance?" "Yes, sir," he nodded slowly. "Thank you. Do you realize what you've done?" he said. "My son almost died because you thought you were above basic humanity." Karen tried to speak to spin some version about safety regulations, but the governor wasn't listening. He just turned to his aide and said, "Get me the HOA charter for this community. Every bylaw, every name on the board." And that's when I knew. Karen's empire of petty control was about to crumble. That night, I sat on my porch again, the wind cold and restless. The neighbors whispered, lights flickered, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear reporters setting up their cameras. Claire came out, wrapping a blanket around me. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "I just wish it hadn't come to this," I muttered. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over, not by a long shot, because Karen Monroe was not the type to back down, even with the governor himself breathing down her neck. And when people like her are cornered, they don't surrender. The morning after the ambulance incident, Oak Ridge Estates didn't wake up to birdsong or sprinklers. We woke up to news vans, flashing cameras, and the governor's name trending everywhere, and in the center of it all, Karen Monroe. Her face was plastered on every local channel, caught Mediel finger-jabbing toward the ambulance as if she owned the world. The headlines were brutal. HOA president blocks EMT's governor's son nearly dies. Small-town HOA power trip sparks outrage. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. From my window, I watched Karen pacing on her porch in a crisp suit, trying to look composed while reporters shouted questions. Her husband, poor guy, stood behind her holding their dog. Eyes full of shame, Claire whispered, "She's done. No one's coming back from this." But I knew better. Karen wasn't the kind to accept defeat, not even from the governor himself. Around noon, I was walking back from the mailbox when I saw her heading straight for me. Heels clicking, face pale but burning with rage. "Mr. Lawson," she said tightly, "we need to talk." I sighed. "Karen, if this is about the video, it's about the truth," she snapped. "You assaulted me. You damaged HOA property, and you interfered in official business." I couldn't help but laugh. "Official business? You blocked an ambulance, Karen. That's not authority. That's insanity." Her jaw tightened. "You have no idea what kind of legal trouble you're in." She handed me a letter, sealed, stamped with the HOA logo. "You'll be hearing from our attorney." Tore it open right there. It was a violation notice for reckless endangerment, property damage, and failure to comply with HOA governance. "You're really doing this?" I asked, staring at her. Karen crossed her arms. "I'm cleaning up this community, and that means removing people who don't respect the rules." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You mean removing people who expose you?" For a split second, she blinked like I'd hit the truth day dawn. Then she turned away. "Enjoy your 15 minutes of fame, Lawson," she hissed. "Because when the cameras leave, I'll still be president." By evening, the governor's office released a statement. It was short, but devastating. No community should value power over compassion. The incident at Oak Ridge Estates is under investigation, and those responsible will be held accountable. Karen pretended not to hear it, but the board did. The HOA vice president, Ellen Briggs, came to my house that night. A quiet woman, mid-50s, always polite. She looked nervous. "Mr. Lawson," she whispered. Glancing around like someone might be listening, Karen called an emergency board meeting tomorrow. She wants to file a lawsuit against you and possibly revoke your property rights. It nearly dropped my coffee. She can't do that. Can she? Ellen shook her head. Not legally. But she's threatening to fine any board member who votes against her. She's desperate. Why would she risk everything? I asked. Ellen hesitated. Because this isn't about pride anymore. She's scared. I heard from a state official today. The governor's office requested our hall's entire financial record. It hit me like a truck. Karen wasn't just power hungry. She was hiding something the next day. The board meeting was chaos. Neighbors filled the clubhouse, cameras rolling, voices echoing through the hall. Karen sat at the front table, hair perfect, lipstick sharp, pretending she wasn't one viral video away from ruin. When she called the meeting to order, the first thing she said was, "Before we begin, I'd like to address the smear campaign being waged against me." Someone in the crowd laughed. She slammed her gavel. Quiet. The media has twisted the truth. I was ensuring compliance and safety by blocking an ambulance. A man shouted. Karen glared. That incident was misunderstood. I stood. We all saw it, Karen. There's nothing to misunderstand. She turned her venom toward me. You endangered lives with your reckless stunt. You broke HOA property and violated procedure. That golf cart? I said, incredulous. You mean the one you parked in front of a dying man? The room erupted in murmurs. Cameras flashed, then Ellen stood up. Madam President, I move that we suspend Karen Monroe pending investigation by the state. Karen's face twisted. You can't do that. Yes, we can, Ellen said calmly. By Law 7.3, emergency suspension due to misconduct affecting public safety. Karen looked around the table, expecting support, but the board members wouldn't meet her eyes. Her voice cracked. You're making a mistake, Ellen nodded. No, Karen, you did. And with that, the board voted unanimous. Karen Monroe was suspended as HOA. President effective immediately. The room broke into applause. I watched her stand there, shaking, lips trembling like a volcano about to erupt. Then, without another word, she grabbed her bag and stormed out. But as she passed me, she stopped, leaned in, and whispered, This isn't over, Lawson. You just declared war. For a few weeks, peace returned. The news moved on. The cameras left, and the neighborhood finally exhaled. The new interim president, Ellen, started undoing Karen's absurd rules, flag fines, mailbox measurements. All of it, it felt like Oak Ridge was finally free again. But one night, around 11 p.m., I heard a noise outside, a soft rumble. Then pop, my truck alarm went off. I ran out, heart racing, and saw the tires slashed clean through. On the windshield, under the wiper, was a note handwritten. Enjoy your freedom, hero. My stomach turned. I called the sheriff, filed a report, but deep down I knew it wouldn't help. Karen was smart. She'd never leave proof that could stick. The next morning, I found my mailbox torn off the post. A week later, a property line was marked with orange tape, the HOA's investigation claiming my fence violated. Setback codes. Karen wasn't gone. She was lurking, waiting, and when the state audit arrived 2 weeks later, everything exploded again. The auditors discovered what none of us could have imagined, missing funds. Nearly $85,000 in maintenance fees, unaccounted for over the last 3 years. Ellen called me right away. It's bad, David. Real bad. Every check leads back to Karen. She embezzled HOA money. I asked. Ellen's voice trembled. Looks like it. But she had help. Who? Her husband. And maybe someone inside the county zoning office. That's when I realized the fight wasn't just about rules anymore. This was corruption hidden behind. Freshly painted fences and fake smiles, And if the governor's office got involved, which they now were, it wouldn't just destroy. It could end careers. Still, I couldn't shake one thought. If Karen had been stealing from the HOA, she'd do anything to cover her tracks. Anything. 2 nights later, Claire woke me up. "David, there's someone outside." I grabbed the flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The night was still, except for the hum of crickets and the faint glow of the stray trade. Then I saw it, a car idling by the corner. Headlights off. I took a few steps forward, trying to see the plate. The car reversed slowly, then sped off into the dark. The next morning, my security camera caught a clear shot. Karen's car. That was the final straw. I drove straight to the sheriff's office and handed over everything: the video, the notes, the vandalism reports, even the threats. The sheriff sighed. "We've been waiting for this. The governor's investigators just contacted us." "You're not the only one she's gone after." "What do you mean?" "She's been sending threatening emails to the state auditors. We're building a case. They don't just fall. They drag others down with them." That evening, I sat with Claire on the porch again. Watching the sunset bleed over the ridge, she took my hand. "You think it's over?" I shook my head. "No, she's not finished yet." So I'd learned something about Karen over the years. She couldn't stand losing control. And after everything she'd lost, her position, her reputation, her grip on the neighborhood, there was only one thing left for her to destroy. Me, and I had a feeling she was about to try. By the time winter crept into Oak Ridge, the air felt different, colder, sharper, like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. Karen Monroe had vanished from sight. No HOA meetings, no porch patrols, number 6 AM complaint letters stuffed in mailboxes. But she wasn't gone. Everyone could feel her shadow. I still got anonymous notes. "Rule breakers get what they deserve," slipped under my door. My motion lights flickered at odd hours. And one night, my security camera caught someone tossing a small envelope into my yard. Inside was a single photo. It's my wife and me, standing outside the grocery store, and on the back, written in red ink, "You should have stayed quiet." That's when I realized this wasn't just revenge. Karen was trying to scare us, to make us feel like prisoners in our own home. But what she didn't know was that the governor's office was already watching her every move. 3 weeks after the audit, Ellen, the interim HOA president, called me over. "David, you need to see this," she whispered, setting a folder on the table. Inside were bank statements, fake invoices, and a handwritten ledger that looked like it had been kept in secret. The name Monroe appeared again and again next to checks written for landscape restoration, fence repair, and community maintenance. Except none of those repairs ever happened. "She's been stealing from us for years," Ellen said. "Every penny of our HOA dues went into her personal account. How'd you get this?" I asked. She glanced around nervously. Her husband's brother found it. He said he couldn't live with the guilt anymore. That was the moment I knew the truth was unstoppable. We turned everything over to the investigators. And within days, the story broke statewide. Breaking news. Former HOA president accused of fraud, intimidation, and obstruction. Karen Monroe, the same woman who yelled at an ambulance to leave her neighborhood, was now facing criminal charges. The footage of her blocking the ambulance played side by side with evidence of her embezzlement, her threats, and her abuse of power. And when the governor spoke again, he didn't hold back. What happened in Oak Ridge Estates wasn't just a lapse in judgment. It was the result of unchecked arrogance, the kind that puts image above integrity. My son survived, but not everyone gets that second chance. This is a wake-up call for every HOA in this state. That night, Oak Ridge came alive. Neighbors who had stayed silent finally spoke up. The Johnsons admitted Karen fined them $500 for hanging Christmas lights too early. The Pearsons confessed. She made them repaint their fence 3 times because the shade of white was too creamy. And old Mrs. Turner cried as she told me. Karen once threatened to evict her for feeding stray cats. People weren't just angry, they were freeing themselves. It was strange seeing a community once ruled by fear slowly come together again. Then came the court date. It was snowing the morning Karen arrived at the county courthouse. Cameras lined the steps. Porters shouted questions. She looked smaller, not the perfectly pressed, power-drunk woman we all knew, but a ghost of her former self. When she walked past me, she didn't even glare. She just whispered, "You think you won, but nobody ever really wins." I didn't respond because she was wrong. Sometimes justice isn't about winning, it's about finally being seen. The judge read out the charges: fraud and embezzlement of HOA funds, obstruction of emergency services, intimidation and harassment. Her lawyer tried to argue stress, media bias, misunderstanding of intent, but the evidence was ironclad. The video of her screaming at the ambulance, the checks traced to her account, the threats she sent to witnesses. By the end of the week, the verdict came down, guilty on all counts. The courtroom gasped. Karen slumped in her seat. The judge's voice was steady. "Ms. Monroe, your obsession with control endangered lives and violated trust. You'll serve 18 months in county detention and repay $82,000 in restitution." A hush fell, and for the first time in years, Oak Ridge Estates felt like it could breathe again. When I got home that evening, Claire was waiting with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it," I corrected her. Everyone who spoke up, everyone who refused to stay quiet, they did. We sat on the porch, snowflakes drifting under the streetlight. For the first time, I noticed how peaceful it looked. No more HOA patrols, no clipboard warriors, just home. Ellen joined us a few days later to hand me something. A letter from the governor's office. It was a commendation for courage and integrity in the face of unlawful authority. At the bottom, a personal note. "Thank you for saving my son. The state needs more people like you." Governor Thomas Caldwell Lee didn't know what to say. I just smiled and folded the letter away. Sometimes justice isn't loud, it's quiet. It's peace after chaos. A month later, Oak Ridge held its first community gathering in years. No HOA agenda, no rules, just neighbors. Kids played on the lawns. The Johnsons grilled burgers. Mrs. Turner brought her famous apple pie. For the first time, it felt like a neighborhood again, not a kingdom ruled by fear. Someone asked if I'd run for HOA president now that Karen was gone. I laughed. "No thanks. I think I'll just enjoy the quiet." But before I went home, I walked by Karen's old house. The porch light was off. President's parking only sign was gone. And for a moment I felt something unexpected. Not anger, not triumph. Just pitied, because in her quest to control everyone, Karen lost everything. Her power, her reputation, her community, and maybe that was her real punishment that night. As I watched the snow fall over Oak Ridge, I thought about everything that had happened. The ambulance, the chaos, the fear, and how one act of arrogance nearly cost a life, but instead exposed the truth. If there's one thing I learned, it's this: power without compassion is just cruelty wearing a suit. Never let anyone convince you that rules matter more than people. Never stay silent when something feels wrong. And never, ever let fear run your home. Have you ever faced an HOA like this? Someone who thought they were above basic humanity? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you believe in standing up for what's right, hit that subscribe button and join me for more real justice stories.